Indians like visuals. They like to see and touch stuff.
Yes.
So I'm like, I don't put it on like this.
So if you want, you can say the tip.
Oh, really?
We have some like right here too.
Oh, I don't know. I'll ask him what he's doing,
Okay.
and then I'll decide.
And then it's
Shauna, Shanana quit.
Shauna Shanana.
Yes.
Shauna Shanana.
Yeah. Shauna, Shanana. Just like Shauna, na, 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 and then just put quit at the end.
Quit it.
Shauna, na, Shauna, na, Shauna, Shanana quit.
Shauna.
If you murder it, I'll say it.
Okay.
Okay.
I might just sit here for a second.
Do you want to just sit here while we talk? You don't have to stand. Or do you want to stand?
I'm gonna stand.
Are you going to talk? Okay. Then I guess I'll stand too.
Sorry.
I'm really short compared to
No, I don't care.
trying to pull us down. Okay. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started again. I think we're good to go now, right, Riley? With our live stream, again, it's recorded, so we can send out the link after we complete the day. We're gonna move on to our next speakers, which are gonna talk about capital for your business. And so we're joined with Shauna. I'm just gonna keep it at that. And Robert. So thank you both for joining us, and I'll let you guys take it.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's see how this microphone goes. I'm not sure how I feel about holding it. Okay. Ani Buju, Nimpi Indigenakash, Ajijak Indodum, Wakanaksin Odawa Indao, Wikwi Dungsin and Donjaba. My name is Shauna Shananaquit. I am from the Crane Clan, and I am from Harbor Springs, Michigan, and I am a proud member of the Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians. And my 9 to 5, I am the Executive Director of Northern Shores Community Development. We are a native CDFI. So I would first like to say miigwech, thank you to the National Center of American Indian Enterprise Development and to our neighbors, the Sioux Tribe of Chippewa Indians. So miigwech for bringing us here. It is an honor to share information of our organization, the work that we do, and the impact that we are making throughout communities that we serve. As a certified Native CDFI, our mission is to create economic opportunities, expand access to capital, and support financial success of individuals, families, entrepreneurs, and tribal communities across Michigan. Today, I will provide an overview of who we are, the programs and services that we offer, and how we are helping strengthening communities through economic development, financial empowerment, and our ongoing commitment to serving 12 federally recognized tribes. Okay. Oh, is this the wrong one? Hit it again. Ooh, there we go. Perfect. As a Native girl, I can be nimble. All right. Who we are. Northern Shores Community Development, once again, we do serve, and I keep repeating this, is all 12 federally recognized tribes. Some CDFIs do not do that, but we do. We feel very fortunate to be able to serve everyone on their reservations as far as tribal communities, econ, and then individuals, families, businesses for their financial resources and opportunities. Our work is grounded on the belief that economic development is the most effective when it reflects and respects the cultural values, the traditions, and the strengths of the communities it serves. So every tribe is different and every community is different. We've noticed that the southern tribes need different support than the northern tribes. They also have different specialties in business and economic development. So they're all really specialists in their area, but they are different tribal nations with different strengths. All right. As a Native CDFI, we provide capital, financial education, technical assistance, and entrepreneur support tailored to the unique needs of tribal communities and underserved populations. Throughout these efforts, we help foster economic self-sufficiency while honoring the cultural heritage and traditional knowledge that continue to guide our communities today. So as Native people, we often have different morals and ethics that drive our communities and that creates a culture within our businesses and how we interact with outside agencies and other tribes. By investing in our people, businesses, and communities, we help create pathways to sustainable growth, financial stability, and long-term prosperity. On to our mission. Our mission is to increase access to capital, strengthen entrepreneurship, and build financial capability and support sustainability in the community and development. Everything we do is focused on creating opportunities, improve financial well-being while contributing to stronger local economies. We believe that when individuals and businesses have the access and tools, the resources they need, that communities become more resilient, prosperous, and prepare for future generations. In our culture here, we do believe in our teachings to always look to the future and our 7 grandfather teachings and our 7 generations. So we try to tailor our programs to that idea and those teachings as Native people. And up here, as you can see, I did put a lot of pictures of our different businesses that we currently have that do those. Up there is they are making maple sugar and syrup. That is a big one. And then we have a new family, Dos Locos. They are a food truck, and they serve right in Petoskey, and they are multi-family generational business. So it's exciting. Okay, let's jump to programs and services. So Northern Shores, we can pull a rabbit out of the hat any day of the week. We are a CDFI. We have a variety of programs and services designed to support individuals, businesses at different stages for their financial and entrepreneurial journeys. We often get many businesses that have been in business for years, and maybe they need a capital injection to grow their business, or maybe technical support. Maybe we bring in folks, or they sit down with us individually, and we work with them on QuickBooks or Excel and show them how to do inventory, programs, because they really are in their fields the professionals, and they know all of their businesses the best. They just need to build up their business to expand and be more profitable. So our services do include lending. That is the mind of our CDFI, that we, the board and the leadership, that our interest rates are lower than your traditional banking. We are unregulated. However, our board of directors does make policies and standards for money. So for instance, our business loans start at 7%. If you go to a bank, you would have to show 3 years of book. With us, you don't have to show any. We will help you build your business to get you there. We also have credit building and debt consolidation lending, consumer loans, personal loans. And those also are lower interest rate. They start at 10%. And those will build your credit score. The smaller ones, 2,500 or less, we do those ones, so then that way and we don't run your credit score. We just look at your information, we work with you so you can build a credit score so you can pursue other lending, or if you want to go to a bank and get lending from there to build your build capital, or, I don't know, a house, a car. So we do a lot of those. And financial education, that will come in many different ways. That might just be me or Nicholas working with someone. We do run classes, and we do work with outside entities to bring in speakers to support our community. While we believe funding is important, we do understand that long-term success requires more than just capital alone. That is why we pair out with lending programs with education, coaching, supporting services, helping our clients build confidence, strengths, and skills, and achieve their goals. Okay, here's one of our classes and a presenter. That is just so you know, the guy in the back, that is my mother. She is an accountant, so she came in, and one of our participants, a farm owner with her daughter, O'Damon and Kiana, and Nick, I'm not quite sure, the picture kept cutting off his head in the presentation, but that's this guy right here. And he works with our clients with business development support. So that's one of our primary focuses when you come in. How do we make it tailor better to your business to be able to grow? Or expand. And we've actually had a lot of expansions this year. We work closely with clients to develop the plans, improve financial management practices, strengthen marketing strategies, and prepare for financing opportunities. Through personalized coaching, technical assistance, and capacity building support, our businesses become loan ready and positioned for long-term success. Our goal is not only to help businesses, but to help them grow, create jobs, and continue to local economies. All right. Here's one of my favorite slides, and I've just put some of the businesses up there. 66% of Northern Shore's lending is actually agriculture and aquaculture. And a lot of financial institutions do not lend, or it's difficult to find one that lend to those types of businesses. However, in Michigan, especially in Northern Michigan, one of our strengths is that. When I was first looking at the portfolio of our books, I said, okay, what are we doing here, and what are we good at, and how can we help our citizens? So we took across the UP and Northern Michigan and a couple Southern tribes and realized that farming has always been here, aquaculture has always been here, and how do we build on that? So we work closely, and we helped a lot of our businesses develop business plans and management practices and strengthening marketing strategies and financing opportunities. So we went out there and looked for different funders that found these things were important, and investors. And one of them was the Native American Agriculture Fund. And they gave us a grant and lending money and technical support, marketing, different grants for insurance, risk management, so we could completely help the entire project and the loan. So one of my best examples that we have that we are very proud of is a Northern Michigan tribe in the UP here came to us, and they are experts in their field. They are fishermen. And so they are actually practicing our treaty rights in our area. And so their family's been doing this, well, forever. And so anyhow, they came to us, and they said, okay, Shauna, we need a boat, but we have no credit. And we don't really run books. And I said, okay, that's okay. Let me see what you've got. So they came in and gave me a bucket of receipts. And I took a look at all their receipts and all their good work that they had stock sales. And I was like, okay, let's do this. We put it down. We created books for them, a little business plan, and said, let's get going. We gave them $50,000. And in that year, they were able to make $250,000. This year, they expanded into another branch in their business and created more jobs and intergenerational wealth. So now they are all the way down for the lower part of the peninsula, all the way to the top of the UP. And it's really exciting to see that. They also collaborate with other tribal fisheries to move forward. So I was just bragging a little bit. Okay, through personalized coaching, we help businesses become loan ready and positioned. So I think I just talked about that. Our goal is not only to help businesses, and oops, sorry, I switched it over after I was bragging about my farm. Okay, includes Native American agriculture, fisheries, local food systems, related businesses, ventures to contribute economic growth and community. Supporting these industries has advanced food sovereignty, create employment opportunities, strengthen local economies while preserving important cultural practices and connections to land and water. So another one that we did was Gitchigowawi Farms. They do maple sugar and syrup. They are a new family. They are Pokagon and Odawa, and they have a little baby. And they went out and had a dream. They started a farm, and they went out there with their hard work and efforts, started selling their syrup. So one of the things that they didn't realize is when we do this technical support is we take a look at the market, and they were just going to only sell it for like $5 to $7. We said, no, you will sell your syrup for just as much as everyone else is charging or more. And that is your specialty. And they have been doing good. Within a couple hours, their first batch was sold. Okay, next. Oh, here we go. Community impact. So the impact of our work can be seen in the communities that we serve. A lot of businesses that are native, if you look around, we have financing within them or grants, or we have worked with other partners to inject capital into our tribal communities. Through lending, education, technical assistance, partnerships, we help expand financing, support business growth, build local wealth, and strengthen resistance. So every loan approved, every entrepreneur supported, every training session delivered contributes to a stronger communities where individuals, families, and farms and businesses can thrive. And our success is not only measured by numbers, but by the lives improved and opportunities created through our work. So as being a CDFI, one of the things, and a nonprofit, we are not looking to drive, there is revenue, but we are looking to see impact in our community. And our funders want to see impact in our communities and want to see Native businesses grow, or the underserved community as well. They are neighbors, and it's important to take care of one another. And in Northern Michigan especially, we are normally small businesses, and we need to support one another. So a lot of times we team up with other community foundations, and we promote different businesses. You'll see Bailey's Farm, that is a GTB company. They started with a goat farm and beekeeping, and they made chimbuca, and now it is a nationwide company. They started manufacturing, and I believe they just got into Myers, but I know that they're shipping all the way to California. So it's really cool to watch those companies grow. There's some of our fishermen. Those are our tough guys. They keep trying to get me on that boat. It's not going to happen, but I will support them dockside. And there's another one of our honey companies that is continuing to grow, and that is underneath of Bailey's as well. So partnerships, that is critical to our CDFI. We have a lot of different ways of funding projects. We partner with banks, which some of them are in this room. Hello, Huntington. We partner with trust funds, Native American Agriculture Fund. You'll hear about that. Tumultuous Loan Fund, OWISTA. They have been a huge impact in our community. We fund with other banks, Citizens National Bank in the area. So there are a lot of different revenue streams that we have. A lot of them also come from the Department of Treasury. We're still waiting for them to keep moving, but yes, they do. They come from there, and so it's exciting. Other things that we do as far as partnerships is we have contracts for technical assistance with different businesses like 20 Fathoms. You might have heard of IndigiPitch. We helped promote that and organize that event to help promote our tribal entrepreneurs and for them to find investors and funding throughout the community. So that was throughout the whole state of Michigan, and all of our tribal nations were able to participate in that. It was exciting. And that's Andrew up there. He's our vice chair. He's Andrew Adewagijik, and our trustee at the bottom, Gregory Shinanaquit, on the board, and Minokame Massey, she was one of our tribal princesses. So we do go into a lot of different community events. Okay, so our strategic priorities. So as we look to the future, our strategic priorities remain focused on expanding opportunity and strengthening impact. The priorities include increasing access and lending capital, enhancing financial education programs, supporting entrepreneurship, expanding technical services, and attracting additional investments in the communities we serve. So for instance, one of the bigger ones that for our strategic planning is we are starting to expand to work with more economic development, tribal, I guess some of them are programs, some of them are enterprises, and some of them are charters. In addition, we are working directly with tribal councils and leadership for their funding projects. There are a lot of government opportunities that folks and tribes are unaware of that we can bring forward that run the money through this CDFI, and then we are able to deploy those monies and help the tribes get direct pays. And then we go out and we look for funders and make capital stacks for those projects. You'll see a lot of them out west, or I would have to say there's a new one that was over in Wisconsin. They did a health park for $68 million. And those were CDFIs that came together and capital stacked. So we do have the ability to come together and support projects. All right, so contact us. In closing, Northern Shores Community Development is dedicated to creating economic opportunities, strengthening communities through access to capital, financial education, and development business support. So thank you for your time and attention and interest in work. We look forward to continue to build strong partnerships and creating meaningful opportunities and support the success of our communities for generations to come. And I would also like to add, my mother is in the room too. So, and she is actually a founder of the CDFI that was formed in 2007. So thank you for coming.
Will be 20 years on February 7th,
Yeah.
2027.
And Miigwech for supporting. And to my aunt, Tammy Shenanigans, Tribal Council, to sit up front and center and to support all of us here in Econ. So, Miigwech. I'm guessing we have arrived at a range of topics, so I can either talk to you later or you can ask questions now. Looks like you're up, buddy. Oh, sure. Oh, that's an 1836 trading company. They're Bay Mills. Yeah, Bay Mills boys. Yeah, I have Tatchersons, yeah. Yeah, so, oh, she's like, wait a minute. Well, they just put up a new, yeah, they just expanded their business as well. So I'm really looking forward to trying that trout. Any other questions?
One quick question.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation. Will we be able to obtain a copy of the slides?
Yes.
All right. I think that's it right now. And
All
Thank you.
right. Congrats.
Good morning. I'd like to thank NEI for inviting me to speak at the conference today. Much appreciated, and thank you for hosting the event. Glad to be a part of it. So, my name is Robert Saruk. I run the Sioux Tribe Thrive, which is in charge of implementing an SSBCI grant. It helps Sioux Tribe entrepreneurs get access to capital, which they might not otherwise have access to. First of all, before I get to my presentation, I want to talk about some of the issues that I have seen throughout my life. I have been in banking for 15 years. I kind of want to explain how banks lend money in case anyone's not aware. Some of the big things they look for in particular, they are looking at your credit score, which is something the previous presentation kind of went into detail how they can help you out with your credit score. So they're looking at your credit score, they're going to look at your collateral, so essentially what you're putting up to secure against debt. So that's going to largely dictate what your interest rate is, and that's going to dictate what they are and aren't willing to lend to you. And then they're also looking at how much you make versus what your monthly debt is. So they want to make sure essentially that you can pay the bill back. Now, what I have found in my career is there is a lack of access in Indian country to these resources, particularly for whatever reason. I'm not 100% sure what the reasons were. Historically, there were other reasons behind it, but some of these programs that we're rolling out now help to combat that to a degree. So it gets access to people who typically were locked out of the market, because how do you get collateral and credit if you've never had access to it before? So that's why some of these programs are so important, and particularly the work the CDFI Northern Shores is doing from that previous presentation. That's something we'll definitely have to be collaborating on here in the future. So the way Sioux Tribe Capital Fund works is it's a loan guarantee program. So it's funded through the SSBCI grant that we received through the Treasury Department. And essentially it works via collateral support or via loan participation. So it incentivizes the bank to lend to you where you might have shortfalls. This button? Okay. So as you can see, those are the biggest problems we've had, though, is insufficient collateral, limited equity, or limited money to put down into your business, because if you don't own any collateral, if you don't own your home, if you don't have other assets that you can put up, it makes the bank less likely to lend to you in that situation. They're going to be more hesitant or apprehensive, or if they do lend to you, your interest rate is not going to be nearly as attractive. The terms might not be nearly as good. So this program helps offset that by essentially giving you collateral or taking a stake in the loan. That way the bank is on the hook for less of the portion of the loan, making the loan less risky, therefore incentivizing the bank to lend to Sioux Tribe members. So those are the biggest things there. Some of our objectives, obviously, expand access to capital, support business formation and growth. So a lot of people that come into my office, they don't really have a game plan. Part of what we do is we go over their business plan with them. They pitch us on what their business plan is. We put them in resources with someone who can put the business plan together. I then review the business plan, go over it with them to ensure that it has its best chance of getting approved. And if it does not get approved, they come back to me. They get feedback from the lender typically, at which point we will go over the business plan, come up with a game plan to get them to the point where they are financed later on. So the way the collateral support works, essentially we pledge a CD on behalf of the tribal member. This helps some of our tribal members who are potentially looking at smaller loan amounts, makes banks more likely to lend to them. So we'll pledge a CD on behalf of them. The bank is the one who sets the loan terms. We are not a direct lender, so you'd still need to go to your lending institution to get a loan. So the bank would still set the terms of the loan, they set the conditions of the loan. We simply are there to incentivize to lend. Think of it as like a guarantee on the loan. So let's say you're looking to get a loan for $100. The bank says they'll only lend you $50, but they require you to put $20 down, but you don't have the $20 to get access to it. The capital fund basically works as a gap where it will cover the difference there to get the bank to the point where they are willing to lend you money. So the biggest reason behind the program is due to the fact, as I talked about earlier, is just the fact it mitigates the risk for the bank and the lending institution. So that's really the biggest problem I have seen is people with a lack of access to any sort of capital whatsoever, whereas the program fixes that gap problem. And potentially, if your credit isn't the best either, it can also work in regards to that. Typically, the way a bank lends to you, the lower your credit score is, the more money they're going to want down, the more collateral they're going to want, the more skin they're going to want in the game to offset any sort of risk. The higher your credit score is, the less money they're going to require you have down, the less they're going to require from you. So this program helps sort of bridge that gap. In case your credit isn't the best, in case your collateral isn't the strongest, it essentially pledges collateral on behalf, or it takes a portion of the loan amount risk away from the lending institution. Okay, the biggest thing here, it also provides greater flexibility too when it comes to financing. Banks might be more willing to give you more attractive interest rates, in particular if there is a stake of the loan they are not on the hook for. So it does provide some reassurance to the lender in that situation. So a lot of those things kind of cover what I just talked about, the fact that it basically shares the risk with the lender. So in the case that the loan defaults, we're in a subordinate lien position. So a subordinate lien essentially means that if the loan was essentially to default, we would be the first one on the hook. So the bank, it really mitigates the bank's risk because the bank at that point knows that, let's say this person defaults on the loan right out of the gate, they're only on the hook for, let's say, 50% of the loan amount, whereas we're on the hook for the majority of it. The Sioux Tribe Capital Fund, through the grant that we received, would cover a portion of it. And just to be clear too, this is not a Sioux Tribe. Sioux Tribe is, we're implementing the grant, we're not directly lending the money, if that makes sense. The Treasury Department is the one who awarded us the grant. We are simply implementing it. It's still within the Treasury guidelines. So if for whatever reason it does not fit within the parameters of the grant, I can't stress enough that it is not Sioux Tribe making that decision. It is the Treasury Department who has their own guidelines overseeing the way the grant is being executed. So typically the way it works from start to finish, we have entrepreneurs come into my office, or they'll give me a call stating that they have an idea for a business. And at that point, we go over what their business plan is. I put them in contact with whoever I feel will be the best resource to sort of straighten out their business plan. We have different vendors that we work with that we send them to. SBDC is a very large one that we send a lot of our membership to, and I believe Northern Shores is going to be one that we intend to send people to here in the near future. And we also can provide technical assistance money. So there are different vendors. We can provide up to $2,700 for Sioux Tribe members who are looking to utilize the program. Now, it'll cover 70% of the cost up to $2,700. So you still would be on the hook for a portion of it. It covers financial advisory, legal, and business services. So if you're preparing to utilize the capital fund, it does need to be used in conjunction with you applying for a loan with the capital fund. So there are some limitations to it. My contact info will be at the end of the presentation, so if you have any questions in regards to it, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to address any concerns and obviously any specific program needs. Obviously, I can get into the details with that later. So one of the things we do as well, we provide ongoing marketing support for our entrepreneurs. We also are in contact with various local agencies, Headwaters North, and other state-run agencies that make us aware of grants that are available. So we do send out email blasts that let our membership know when grants become available. They do fluctuate from time to time, and obviously grants change. So I always tell people to reach out to us. Just because we don't have one available right now does not mean we won't have one available down the line. And we can also help you with marketing your business, and we also have our own website, and it's basically a database for Sioux Tribe members to go in there, and they can utilize other services, and increases your digital footprint by putting you out there a little bit more. Because one thing I have noticed, we have a lot of great small businesses, but most of them don't have much of a digital footprint. So it does help increase that. And we can help you out with Google search engine words and get you a little bit more face time online. So the long-term goals, obviously, if you own something, it's the fastest way to build wealth in this country. So the sustainability of the program, the whole goal is to get sustainability for Sioux Tribe members, entrepreneurs to be able to build their own business and expand private sector economic activity is one of the biggest ones. The second you can actually own more stuff, the more you can participate in the economy, the more collateral you have, et cetera, sort of builds. And that's how you typically build generational wealth, is the more assets you can own, it gets passed down generation to generation, so it expands. So one of the biggest things we focus on is the capital alone does not build it. Obviously, you still need to run your business effectively, and being able to market to people and get out there. Being a part, let's see here, economic development. The Sioux Tribe Capital Fund, it provides the capital portion of it. It might provide the loan guarantee, but Thrive itself actually provides ongoing support. So the Capital Fund is a program. It's basically a subset of Sioux Tribe Thrive. So it incentivizes people. It might get you through the door, but Sioux Tribe Thrive can help you with ongoing support throughout the process as well. And there's my contact info and the website link to both the Sioux Tribe Capital Fund. It'll sort of break down how the whole program works in a little bit more detail. We have 5 banks signed up as of right now. We're always looking to sign up more lenders for the program. It does lend nationwide. We have had several success stories. We had a very large mental health facility open in Marquette by one of our members. I believe the grand opening of that is next week, but that closed a few months ago. And we also have a meat processing plant that closed in South Dakota. So one of the big pushbacks I got when I took this position was that we simply only service to the 7 service counties that Sioux Tribe members are in. This program does not have that limitation. It lends nationwide. So if you have anyone that is looking to get signed up for the program, I encourage them to reach out to me. I am on the phone with banks daily trying to encourage them to sign up for the program, to see the incentive of it. The best way I can describe it, if you know what an SBA guaranteed loan is, it mimics that. So essentially, but there's a lot less paperwork involved. Your current SBA loan will take 3 to 6 months to close on average. This one is more like 3 to 4 weeks. So it moves much faster. There's a streamlined approval process, which will incentivize banks to get on board with it. The biggest problem I have found is it's sort of a niche program for our membership, and obviously with dealing with banks that are larger, you have to go through a board of directors, and there's several layers of actually getting someone approved. So that has been the biggest hurdle, I would say, for the capital fund thus far. But we do have some lenders who are signed up, and they've done a lot of great work for us thus far. And looking forward to the future, obviously, the more success we have and the more we start to talk about our success stories, we look forward to in the future. And then the second we get more people built up on their credit as well, I do think that's going to help us down the line, because we do have a number of people who are working on their credit. But this has been the first year that the capital fund's been rolled out, have several success stories thus far. As we continue to build on credit, and I believe we have Tara Parrish is here from Bay Mills community. She and I have been working on a project together with Headwaters North where we're going to be rolling out a website that basically gives basic tools for credit building for tribal members. Teaches them the basics, so if they want to go look it up, it gives them the basics of how to build a credit score, what goes into making your credit score, how to maintain healthy credit. So those resources are going to be out there and available, and looking forward to, as those become more available, it should help in the future with getting people more ready for bank financing when they go in there, at least helping out with the credit portion of it. So that's pretty much it. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. Oh, sorry. I missed a question. You're good? Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought someone raised their hand. Thank you so much. Did you guys have anything else? Okay. Hey, thank you guys so much. Next, we have John Sharaka, and John is going to go over government contracting and anything that pertains to that. So if you could welcome John. Yeah, I'll go get it. So there's a new feature on that.
Hi guys, good morning. Thanks for being here. Appreciate your time, and I know it's a long day, and I know government contracting isn't always the most exciting thing to talk about, but it is an interesting marketplace currently, and it definitely is an interesting marketplace for small businesses because the government's the largest buyer of goods and services in the world. But before I get started, as this slide comes up, well, first of all, thank you to the National Center. Thank you to the Sioux Tribe for hosting. Thank you guys for being here. We've done these sessions all around the country, Alaska, Hawaii, to help individuals figure out the federal marketplace, to help them understand how to get engaged. Sometimes it can be a maze, but as you learn and gain traction, it can be an incredible source of revenue for your small business. And oftentimes, at least from my perspective, it's a win-win because the federal government gets something that's very innovative, creative from small businesses that are flexible and responsive as opposed to large businesses. And then small businesses get a source of revenue, which historically has been, pretty much a guaranteed source of revenue. Obviously, we've seen some challenges to those guarantees with respect to some of the DOGE actions, et cetera. Not all of which is bad. As taxpayers, we want the federal government to be efficient, but it has impacted the federal marketplace. Real quick, as far as my background, I used to run the federal government small business set-aside programs under the Obama administration for about 7 years. So the federal government is required to set aside contracts for small businesses by law. And then under that small business set aside, there are various categories for different types of businesses. And I administered the program for about 7 years, have been doing advisory work since. We support tribal entities, individually owned entities, women-owned small businesses, minority-owned small businesses, et cetera. How many folks are currently doing federal contracting with the federal government? Okay. How many folks are certified in any of the set-aside programs? 8A, women-owned, service-disabled, hub zone. Okay. How many women-owned? Service-disabled? Thank you for your service, sir. 8A? Hub zone? No. Okay. I don't think I missed any of them. How many are considering working with the federal government? Okay. And how many have applied and haven't heard anything? Okay. Okay. So I'll give, because there's several folks that have and are currently working with the federal government. And I can always do the session, which is very basic, to understand the programs, or we can elevate it about what's going on in the marketplace today and how we advise our clients on approaching the marketplace. But it sounds we should be somewhere in the middle. Basically, and the one thing that I'd want to share with you guys is this is much more fun if it's interactive, right? So if you have any questions, something comes up, I say something that either you don't understand or piques an interest, please feel free to raise your hand. I know they want to get the mic to you, but the more conversational it is, the better, rather than you guys just sitting there listening to me the whole time. One of the things I did before is I digress, but I taught at Catholic U, and one of the reviewers, the students get to review you, said, he's kind of knowledgeable, but his voice is monotone, and he always puts me to sleep. So I took that with a grain of salt, but conversation is better, so please keep engaged. That way we both will stay awake. So, federal government, largest buyer of goods and services in the world. 23% of the federal spend has to go to small business by law. Historically, over the last several years, it's been closer to 25%. That's billions and billions of dollars by law going into small business. So as a small business, even if you're not focused on the federal side, the federal government buys almost every good product, service that you can think of. So as a small business, it's not a bad idea, even if you're not on the federal side, to at least consider it as a way to diversify your marketplace. And historically, once you gain traction in the federal marketplace, building on that because of your past performance, at least from our clients' perspective, has created a lot of traction that you can then expand beyond maybe one buying activity or one federal agency. And so of the 23%, there are set-aside programs for different categories, if you will. And we can talk a little bit about these. The one that a lot of folks always focus on and historically has been really beneficial, because it's not just a set-aside program, it's a business development program, is the 8A program. And so individuals are able to apply to the 8A program. It's a business development 9-year program. And once you are in the program, you have the benefit of limited competition. In other words, there can be requirements just set aside for firms like yours, 8A, or you have the benefit of direct awards. So within certain thresholds, say $4.5 million for services, $7 million for manufacturing. Below those thresholds, the default is actually supposed to be sole source. Now, for those that are in the 8A program, because of some of the changes in the federal acquisition regulations so far, and if I use an acronym and you guys are like, what the heck is that? Raise your hand. Because of the federal acquisition regulations rewrite, which quite frankly we've seen multiple iterations of lately, we've seen the federal government agencies adopt them individually. Some have adopted various parts of the FAR, some have adopted all of the revisions. They are being released for final review and comment. And it's created some challenges to that traditional way the 8A program has operated. In other words, where historically under the thresholds of the $4.5 million, the default was sole source, they are at least attempting to introduce competition even within those thresholds. So it takes that, potentially, takes that benefit away from the 8A program. Yes, sir?
Online, they're asking, can you just give a basic definition of the 8A program?
Yeah, thank you. So the question was, can I give a basic definition of the 8A program? Definitely, and then we can go into a little bit more specifics with respect to the 8A program. 8A program is 2 requirements to be in the program: economically disadvantaged and socially disadvantaged. So this is sort of how we get a little bit into the weeds, because economically disadvantaged is pretty, I don't want to say simple, but it's black and white. There are certain thresholds with respect to total assets, net assets, annual income that define if you are economically disadvantaged. You fill out some sheets, you fill out some personal financial statements, it'll determine if you qualify for the program. Socially disadvantaged is where we've seen some court cases and where we've seen some adjustments to the program. And we recently as last Friday, saw some new draft regulations with respect to eligibility for the program. So historically, when I was running the program, there were presumed classes of social disadvantage. So if you fell under one of those presumed classes, Native American, Hispanic American, African American, Asian Pacific Islander, you could check that box and then you can move to economic disadvantage status. Because of a court case named Ultima, where the constitutionality of that program was challenged, it became a social disadvantage narrative. So what does that mean? It means that the agency said, we can't accept presumption anymore. You have to demonstrate that you have been discriminated against, so anybody can. And this existed before anyways. If you didn't fall into one of the presumed, you could do your narrative and demonstrate disadvantaged status. And there was a reason for that, right? Because even a Caucasian female in construction, oftentimes disadvantaged, discriminated. So even when I was running the program, 2010 to 17, we had individuals in the 8A program that weren't in the presumed class because they demonstrated that they had been discriminated against. As a result of Ultima, everybody had to fill out that social disadvantage narrative. So as it stands today, you're economically disadvantaged, there's a calculus to that, and then you have to be socially disadvantaged, and in order to be socially disadvantaged, you have to fill out the narrative and demonstrate this discrimination, but not just discrimination. How did that impact you, right? Did you lose a job? Did you lose access to education? Did you lose an opportunity to get funding? What are the things that impacted you? And then the last step of that, which is sometimes the most challenging, is but for the discrimination, this happened, right? It's not that you didn't get the job, well, maybe you weren't the best qualified. It's but for the discrimination, I didn't get the job. So connecting those dots. So that's the way it's been historically, I say historically, since 2.5 years ago, the summer of whatever that comes out to, 23, how the program had been administered. There hasn't been any application approvals in the 8A program since August of 2025. So it's been almost 9 months, 10 months, 8 months, whatever the math is. But there was a proposed regulation, and this is just last Friday, where the social disadvantage narrative or process is presumably going to come out. Again, this is up for public comment, but it's presumably going to come out, and it's basically going to say, have you been discriminated against? And by the way, there's a new category, that says if you were ever impacted by DEI policies and negatively impacted by DEI policies, you too can now become 8A. So I am almost certain that that's going to be challenged in the courts, so we don't know exactly what's going to happen to the 8A program. But having said all that, the 8A program nevertheless still gets a significant number of dollars every year. If you're in the program, I'd encourage you to try to figure out, and we can talk about this, how to leverage your participation in the program. If you're thinking about applying to the program, you may want to wait until the decisions with respect to any court challenges are addressed. So that's the basics of it, the basics of the 8A program, economically and socially disadvantaged. Now, in order to be eligible for the program, the socially and economically disadvantaged individual needs to own and control the entity. But that's similar across all those, women-owned, service-disabled. You have to own and control. There's a lot of sort of nuances to what does own and control mean. How many people are looking to potentially get certified either in any of the programs? Okay, so own and controlled is important because ownership is easy. It's 51%. You have to own 51%. Control becomes more difficult. So if you look at your operating agreement and there is provisions in your operating agreement that require unanimous consent from your minority partner, then bless you. Then SBA presumably will say that you don't control. Why? Because you can't make day-to-day decisions. And then now there are special, extraordinary instances where the SBA will agree to unanimous consent provisions, but in general, the individual that the designation is based on needs to own and control. And then there's unique circumstances. Let's say, and I'll give you an example, and I'll see if there's any questions once I give you this example. If a significant level of by that source. Why? Because obviously you're not going to make any decisions that's going to impact your relationship with your significant source of revenue. If you have a minority partner that put up $1 million and you put up nothing, even as a 51% owner, SBA might say, well, there's negative control there because clearly, yes, on paper it looks like you can do this, but you're going to depend on the $1 million and you're not going to do anything if the $1 million investee says no. So you have to be concerned about not just sort of the overt of what's in the paper, your operating agreement, with respect to ownership, 51%, and control, but also the potential for sort of issues around negative control, sources of income, issues around unanimous consent, et cetera. Any questions so far? And by the way, so again, that control issue, the structure issue of 51% is similar across the other set-aside programs. The individual that the designation is based on is required to own and control. Any issues and concerns around that? Because if you have relationships with other firms, if there's a lot of prime sub relationship, joint venture relationship, common management, common ownership, those can lead to affiliation, which when you are applying, you want to be concerned of those as well, because affiliation is an issue where SBA will potentially raise flags as well. We can get into that. But let me stop there real quick. Any questions so far?
I have a question.
Yes.
So what if somebody opened a business a long time ago and forgot about it and they just never really dealt with it and closed it officially?
So as long as, so the SBA will do like a LexisNexis search and search of business ownership. So closing it officially is the important part. If it's just existent out there, number one, you should disclose it. Number two, if it's not doing anything, you just have to explain it. But the best scenario is if you formally shut down that operation and file your tax reports to officially close it. What SBA is really concerned about, more so than sort of an old business that isn't doing anything, is a relationship with multiple businesses where you have common ownership, common management, where they can potentially find you affiliated. And affiliation impacts control, but it also impacts size. So for all these programs, the other common denominator is that you have to be small in order to apply to the program or be eligible for the program. Small depends on what your NAICS code is, North American Industry Classification Code is. So if you are a service provider in IT services, the NAICS code small business size standard right now is I think somewhere around 38 million. It might have gone up to 45 million. Some people will say, well, that's ginormous, like 38 or 48 something million dollars. In professional services, it used to be 17, now it's 21. So you have to be small for your primary NAICS code. What will happen is if you have relationships with other firms, you could be found to be affiliated with those firms, and SBA will combine your revenues to determine if you're still small. And people actually get into trouble in this respect. And when I was, and I'm not trying to say this to scare people, but do your homework before you submit your application. When I was running the programs, one of the things that we wanted to do is encourage service-disabled veterans to apply to the 8A program. We said, you know, if you think you can qualify, go ahead and apply. Service-disabled veteran went ahead and applied. As they were going through the evaluation process, the SBA's business opportunity specialists looked at all the documentation and said, well, wait a second, 90% of your revenues are coming from one source. And it looks like you might be affiliated with that source because it's, you know, it's all coming from one source. Went to a size determination specialist, again, different hand at the agency. The size determination specialist said, yep, you're definitely affiliated. So not only are we going to combine your revenues, so now you can't get into the 8A program, but guess what? We're actually going to kick you out of the service disabled program as well because you're affiliated with an other than small business. So before you submit, and I'm not saying that to scare anybody, but before you submit, sort of do the homework around the program requirements, some of the nuances of being eligible for the program, and then I'd look to apply. And then just one wrap up with the 8A program, because it is a 9-year business development program. One of the things that a lot of firms used to do is that, yeah, hey, I think I'm eligible for the program, so I'm going to go ahead and apply. Well, unless you have a track record and you have past performance and you can leverage those 9 years to grow your business, I would sort of discourage you to getting into the program too early, especially in the current environment we're in right now, right? So, you know, there are a lot of contracting officers are being discouraged to use the 8A program, to set requirements aside and to do sole source. As an individual, you get one bite at the apple. You get one nine-year term. And the sole source requirements that I spoke about earlier, you get weaned off those in year 7, 8, and 9. So there's a developmental program and there's sort of a transitionary stage. And so if you're starting to just gain traction in year 5 after being in the program for 5 years, and all of a sudden the government's like, okay, you know what? We're going to wean you off of sole source, then you're not taking full advantage of that direct award opportunity. So a lot of times we tell folks, you know what, if you think you're ready, but you're not, if you think you qualify, but you're not quite ready, hold off until you're ready. What does ready mean? Ready means I have several contracts under my belt. It means I have some relationships I can leverage. It might mean that I have a mentor-protege arrangement where my mentor can help me do business development, bidding, project implementation. And we'll talk about the mentor-protege program this week because the small nascent firms entering the federal marketplace, especially in this environment, finding a mentor or doing joint ventures, I think, is pretty important and key in trying to be competitive in this marketplace. And so strategies around mentor-protege, joint venture, teaming become really important, and we guide a lot of our clients through that. Any other questions around sort of the set-asides and the 8A program so far? No? Do we have any tribally owned entities? Okay. So tribes, just so you guys know, because I know you always hear tribes have huge, you know, advantages over individual 8A firms. Real quick, tribes certainly can have multiple 8A. So as an individual, you get one bite at the apple. Tribes can have 8A number 1, number 2, number 3, et cetera. In addition to having multiple 8A subsidiaries, they also have much higher thresholds with respect to sole source. So a tribe, technically, or an Alaskan Native Corporation or a Native Hawaiian organization, technically can get an unlimited sole source award, 100 million, 120 million. At a particular level, it used to be 100, Department of Defense increased it to 150. At a particular threshold, there's a justification and approval required. So at 100 million or 150 million, the contracting officer has to prepare a justification and get an approval from a higher authority, higher contracting authority. Any questions, concerns? Okay, so the one unique program, and I'll talk about this real quick. The one unique program, so up here, is Hub Zone, historically underutilized business zones. What is unique about that is it's not necessarily based, or I shouldn't say necessarily, it's not based on the individual. It's based on the location of the principal office and the location of your employees. Another thing that's unique about the program is that historically, and this administration's been a little bit unique, historically, Republican administrations have favored the Hub Zone program as opposed to the other set-aside programs. So if you're not, do we have any Hub Zone firms? No. So a historically underutilized business zone firm means your principal office, and it doesn't mean your headquarters. It means your principal office. What does that mean? Where most employees work. And you know, a lot of people play with this. So let's say you have 2 locations. One has 10, one has 9. One's in the Hub Zone, the other isn't. Just move one person. Now you have the most individuals, and that becomes your principal office. Your principal office has to be in a Hub Zone. A Hub Zone is a historically underutilized business zone. Housing and Urban Development publishes data based on economics, unemployment, poverty rates, et cetera. SBA has an awesome map, actually. You go in there, you put in your address, and it says you're in a Hub Zone or you're not in a Hub Zone. So that's step 1. Is your principal office in a historically underutilized business zone? And you'd be shocked. Like, there's 2 blocks in the middle of Washington, D.C. that are considered Hub Zone. So that's step number 1. And by the way, if you have job site employees, like let's say you're doing work at Aberdeen or White Sands or something, you can exclude those guys from the calculation. So it's all your other employees. Where are most of them located? Principal office. That becomes your principal office. You can qualify for step 1. Step 2 is 35% of your employees. Now you throw all your employees in, right? Even the guys that were on the job site. 35% of your employees have to live in a Hub Zone. Not the same Hub Zone, any Hub Zone in the country. And an employee is anybody that works 40 hours a month, not a week, a month. So again, not gaming the system, but playing by the rules. 40 hours a month, an intern living in a college town that is usually a Hub Zone can qualify. So you can run your numbers to hit to the 35% mark. And a lot of folks don't realize, that you can't have multiple set-aside. So the government can't do an 8A Hub Zone, women-owned service disabled set-aside. However, they get multiple credit. So if they do an 8A set-aside, but you happen to be Hub Zone, women-owned service disabled, like the unicorn, that contracting officer finds you really attractive because they get multiple credit. They get that $1 million contract in 4 different buckets to hit their goals, the 23% goal. So we always encourage folks, if you think you can qualify for more than one designation, apply, because it makes you more attractive to the contracting officers who are working to meet their goals because they have statutory requirements to meet. Yes, question?
51% own business, reside within a Native community, the one principal. Partner is located off the reservation because they can do their work remotely. And third employee is also off reservation, not in a Hub Zone. How can they make it so that the 51% owner that resides and the principal office is on native land qualifies for the hub zone program?
So that's a little difficult because in that case, there's 3 employees, so you're a third, a third, a third. You're not going to hit the 35%. So there's one point that you make that's really important. All tribal land, federally recognized tribal land, and areas surrounding adjacent and congruent, I think they call it, is considered by law hub zone. So the challenge in your scenario, though, is you're going to hit 1/3 or 33%. You're not going to hit 35%. You will have to move somebody to, as far as the employee number is concerned, you would have to move somebody to be above the 35% threshold.
Or hire a part-time person?
Yes, you could do that, or an intern, et cetera.
Or a
Absolutely.
temporary?
Absolutely, or an intern. Because again, an employee is someone that works 40 hours a month. Any other questions? No? Okay. I don't know how we got all the way over there. I guess I must have been holding down this. Oh. You're jumping around. I'm like, what? How did that happen? I like that. Okay, you're keeping me on track. Okay, so we talked about the size standards, right? Any questions around that? Every requirement that comes out. So even though, let's say you're 8A, your primary NAICS code, you're small, every contract that comes out has a NAICS code assigned to it. So you can technically, again, if your revenues are $35 million, you're technically small for IT services, so you can bid on those. But you're not small for professional services. That's 21 million. So technically, you can be small for some NAICS codes and not for others. And for the certification, you have to be small for your principal or primary NAICS code. I think that's that. One of the things I do want to talk about, where is the basics of the program? Okay. So for those guys that are currently doing federal government, how many of you bid just on stuff that comes out of SAM, the Systems for Award Management? So one. Okay. And how often has that been successful? Super successful? Not successful? Okay. So look, so when we first get into federal contracting, and by the way, before I went to government, my dad had started a federal contracting program back in like the mid-'80s. I did that for like 20 years. Oftentimes when we enter federal contracting, one of the things that we look at is the System for Award Management. Number one, you got to register in there, right? So you got to go in, you got to register. It's going to ask you a whole bunch of questions. It'll ask you revenue questions, employee questions. It'll determine if you're small. And by the way, you can pick more than one NAICS code. You can pick a principal NAICS code, which is where you do most of your work. Now, we've had clients that are like, well, I'm going to put, and I got to always say this carefully, shipbuilding, right? Because it's 1,500 employee size standard. It's like you can't just put shipbuilding because you picked it out of the air. Ultimately, the SBA, or if you get protested, they're going to do an analysis to see what your preponderance of work is and say this is the appropriate NAICS code for you. But when you fill out SAM and get registered to do work with the federal government, it'll determine if you're small. Once it determines if you're small, it'll open up, and folks don't know this, it'll open up another file, and you'll continue to go in there. You want to make sure you upload and document the additional questions, like your past performance, like your capabilities, because when you're small and the federal government is trying to meet their goals, when the contracting officer goes to do research, they're going a lot of times to SAM and just doing research to see who does what they need in that local jurisdiction. So if you're not updating, and if you're not going in there and actually filling the extra pages out with your past performance and capabilities, and then if you're not regularly updating that, you're getting left out in the market research phase. But to my question that I asked, a lot of folks look at SAM and say, okay, well, opportunities come out on SAM. So every time I'm just going to put in some keywords, I'll get a notification, I'll see they're buying widgets, and I'll respond. Well, that's a good way of doing it, but a lot of times that response date is 30 or 40 or 45 days, sometimes 60. It's getting shorter and shorter. But your competition has probably been tracking that forever and already has their team set up, already has their partners set up, has probably already talked to the government buying office, and has probably put 70 or 80% of their proposal together. So you're at a huge disadvantage if you're just waiting for SAM opportunities to come up. So what's the alternative? Well, one of the alternatives is you're a big business, you're always in the halls of these agencies, you're talking to contracting officials, you're talking to program officials, you're getting the latest intel, and you're starting to build out your teams because you know what's coming out. Well, we can't do that as small businesses because oftentimes we're just trying to get our foot in the door. So what's the other alternative? The other alternative is SAM. Now look, there's fancy, $5,000, $10,000, $1,200 systems like Bloomberg Government, FedMine, a bunch of others that'll do this analysis for you. But a lot of times you can do it yourself on SAM. What's the government buying and how are they buying it? So if I'm selling widgets, right? I want to know who's buying the most widgets. SAM will do that. You can put in an NAICS code, you can put a keyword in, it'll tell you who's buying the most widgets in the federal government. That's step number one, right? So let's say you find out that Aberdeen Proving Grounds in Maryland is buying $10 billion worth of widgets. And you're like, wow, I got widgets, I'll go sell there, right? But if that's step number one, if there's only one contract for $10 billion, that's probably not going to go small business. So step number two, is there a plurality of small business? In other words, are there hundreds or tens of thousands of of contracts for widgets? Because then I can be competitive in that marketplace. They're buying a lot of widgets from a lot of different small businesses. Step two is, or step three, is, okay, are they setting it aside, right? Is it all going large business or is it going small? And if it's going small, is it going 8A or women-owned or service-disabled? So I'm one of those, or maybe I can even partner with one of those. So that's another step. And then it's how are they buying it? Because more and more in the federal government, they don't have the one-off contracts for a widget. A lot of times they'll go off the GSA schedule. Or now, and we can talk about this a little bit this afternoon, they have government-wide acquisition vehicles, like a big $1 billion widget master contract that all agencies can pull from. So are they buying off of that? Are they doing individual contracts? Are they going off the GSA schedule? That enlightens me on my strategy on how to approach selling widgets to Aberdeen Proving Ground. And so as a part of this analysis, what you'll end up with is who's my top 5 targets, right? Because in the federal government, it can be a maze. Like, you got the VA with all their regional offices, you got the Department of Defense, who's, the biggest buyer of goods and services, 70% or 74% of the federal spend. You got every agency, right? So this will determine at least like maybe the top 5 or top 10 targets. Once you determine that, then you look at, okay, when are these contracts expiring, right? And is the incumbent getting too large to bid on small businesses, or are they graduating from the 8A program? Because if they're graduating from the 8A program, they can't get the recompete. So that's like low-hanging fruit. So I'm going to start figuring out when Aberdeen has industry days, matchmaking. Are they going to be at the Reservation Economics Summit or the National 8A Conference? I want to get in front of them and let them know that I'm buying widgets or I'm selling widgets. So this strategy sort of helps small businesses with using the limited resources that they have most efficiently, right? Who's buying what I'm selling? How are they buying it? And by the way, it also helps you determine who your competition is and who your potential partners are. So even if they're buying off the schedule and not individual contracts, that doesn't mean you should give up. Then it's like, okay, well, who's selling? Maybe I can partner with them. Or if they're buying off a GWAC, so more and more government-wide acquisition contracts. Government is using, Oasis, Alliant, SBI, I forget the name of it now. There are a bunch of acronyms, and I have a list of them on this afternoon's slides. So if they're doing that, number one, doesn't mean that you should just give up. There's two things that you should look at. One is, who's my potential partner? Two is, when is there an open season to get on that vehicle? Because generally every 5 years there's an open season, so I can potentially look to see when I can get on those vehicles. Now the bar on getting on those vehicles is sometimes high, so as a nascent firm you might not be able to get on the vehicle, but guess what? You can probably find a mentor, create a joint venture, and we'll talk about that this afternoon, create a joint venture, inherit the past performance of your mentor in that joint venture, and then bid on it. So more and more we see the small businesses that are getting in some of these larger vehicles are mentor-protege joint ventures. So that's sort of the SAM strategy. Now, a lot of times people are like, okay, I did my homework, I need to go talk to the contracting officer. That's at least one step, but it's a three-legged stool, right? So the contracting officer is responsible for executing on behalf of the folks that have the money. Who has the money? The program office. So the program office has the funds. The contracting officer executes on acquisition. So the contracting officer knows all the goals, knows how to do it. The program office is like, yeah, we got to spend this money. This is what I want. But I might like this firm. How do we get to this firm? So it's important to figure out, not only do I want to get in front of the contracting officer, I want to figure out who the program office is and how do I get in front of them as well. And then the last piece is the small business specialist. So even in this environment where we're seeing cuts left and right, where we're seeing a significant number of small business specialists disappearing, every activity has a small business specialist. So the third leg of the stool is, who's the small business specialist that covers this buying activity, and how do I get in front of them, right? And you can email them, you can call them. A lot of times they're overworked and maybe don't respond. They're fighting to get requirements set aside every day. So even if they don't respond, if you're sending them your corporate qualifications, your one-pager, you're telling them that this requirement is coming up and you're qualified to do it, they can advocate for you, or at least for a set aside, or even potentially a sole source. So these are the sort of the things to be aware of, and also a way to make sure that you're not wasting your marketing dollars and resources ineffectively, because ultimately the federal government landscape is a maze, especially as a small business looking from the outside in. Any questions so far on sort of strategy, market research, targeting, partnerships, getting into SAM? Getting into SAM, if you're not registered, is a pain in the butt. As soon as you start doing it, you're going to get like 1 million emails like, we too can help you, just pay us $250. You don't have to pay anybody. But you'll get like random emails from like .mil addresses, and you have to respond to those, because if you don't in 3 days, you get knocked out and you got to go in again and do it all over again. So and by the way, the PTACs in the National Center has, now they call them the Apex Centers. National Center has several of those. They are there to assist you for free, and the local SBA district offices can support you as well. There are consultants that can help you, and if you're willing to pay for it, sure, if you have the resources, but you can do it yourself, and there's assistance available to get access and get that done, because that really is step number one. Any questions, comments, issues? I keep thinking I hear a knock at the door, but it's like a ghost. Any questions? Comments? No? Okay.
Any online?
No? How much time do I have?
4 minutes.
That's it?
No, you have 14.
14. Okay.
9, maybe 9.
9.
If
Okay.
you're in at 12:15, it's 12:06.
Okay. Your math is like my math.
6.
Okay, so then I would encourage you guys to look at this stuff, right? Because the small business search, number one, remember how I told you when you're in SAM, it opens up a different file for you. That's the small business search. It actually isn't the system that's owned by the GSA and SAM. it actually transfers you to the SBA system, which is a small business search. If you're looking for partners locally, you can go in there, or even if you're looking at your competition. You can go in there, you can put their name in, it'll do a search, you can put a keyword in, it'll tell you what their certifications are, it'll tell you when their expiration date is. But what I will tell you is that the federal government gets their own view of that, where they can see your past performance, so it's important to have that filled out. But it's an interesting and unique tool to use for business development. Last one, SBA has a subcontracting network website or search tool. So remember when we talked about the federal government's 23% small business goal. Under that, there's 8A HubZone, women-owned service disabled. All of those are 5%, except for HubZone, that's 3%. Federal government required to meet those. Every year they pretty much do, except for they're under on the women-owned and they're under on the HubZone. So those are two areas that they're looking to identify more small businesses where they can go to. What a lot of folks don't realize is that the large primes, they are required to have small business subcontracting goals. And as requirements get larger and more complex, more contracts, unfortunately, at least from my perspective, are going to the large primes. So a lot of times as a small business, our entrance into federal contracting is actually subcontracting. So the subnet, it's called subnet, it's sort of antiquated. SBA has been threatening to update it for years and years. But subnet lists large prime contractors that are looking for small business subcontracting partners. So at least it is at least an overview of what large primes are not able to meet their subcontracting goals. When I talked about identifying potential partners from SAM or USA Spend, which are combined now, you can also potentially find large business prime partners. And when you are looking at, let's say, Aberdeen, when they have Industry Day, they usually require their large business prime contractors to be present as well, because they want to encourage them to meet their subcontracting goals. So a lot of times, getting your foot in the door is through subcontracting. Last thing, well, not the last thing I'll say because I have a few more minutes, but how many folks, several folks raised their hands with respect to current federal contracts. How many folks have leveraged that? And say if you're doing work at White Sands, have you visited the small business specialist to let them know that you're performing either as a prime or a sub, and that you're doing great work, and that you're eligible, and 5 minutes, you're eligible and capable and able to do any set-aside work that they might want to do? Anybody follow up when they're working with the federal government with the small business specialists? Yeah, kind of, maybe-ish. Yeah, a lot of folks don't realize, look, so they're overwhelmed, they're understaffed, but a lot of folks don't realize that every federal agency has an office of, now they call them small business programs. A lot of them haven't changed their names. Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, OSDBU, right? And the larger ones have the OSDBU at a high level. So Department of Defense, as an example, they have Office of Small Business Programs, DOD. Then they have OSBP, Air Force, Army, Army Corps of Engineers, Navy. Air Force is a one-man shop now, unfortunately, because of cutbacks. But historically, and even all the other components, then have small business specialists covering the buying activities that you might be interested in. So it's really important to figure out who that is, especially if you're doing work. So remember I said if you found out Aberdeen, make sure you go to Contracting Officer, Program Office, Small Business Specialist. But most importantly, if you are actually doing work on the base or the facility or the compound or the agency, you should definitely be trying to figure out how to get in front of the small business specialist. Let them know the great work you're doing. Let them know that your client is satisfied. Let them know that you are a small business, 8A, women-owned, service-disabled hub zone, and that you're capable and eligible to do the work. That is like the easy, low-hanging fruit that you should be following up on if you are, even if it's a subcontracting. A lot of times your primes are like, yeah, we'll take care of the government. We don't want you to talk to the government, right? Even if you're doing sub work, you're not messing up the contract and trying to get to the contracting officer or the program office, even though I think you should. Not mess up the contract, but talk to those folks. But you should, at a minimum, be talking to the small business specialists to let them know that you're on base, on compound, at the agency doing good work. Last thing, just because folks don't understand how this actually happens, how do requirements get set aside? And I'll be quick because I have limited time. There are two ways. Under the Simplified Acquisition Threshold, SAT, which follows SAP. So under SAT, there's Simplified Acquisition Procedures. So that went up to $350,000. Now you might say $350, that's a lot of work. Well, there's Simplified Acquisition Procedures. So it is a good place to get your foot in the door. Everything under the threshold is reserved for small business entirely, right? So if you're seeing requirements, and agents, we should track this when I was in government. If you're seeing an agency not meet it, or requirements going other than small, I would complain. Complain to who? Complain to the small business specialist. Complain to the SBA's procurement center representatives, and we'll talk about that in a second in the rule of two. So everything under the SAT, number one follows SAP, so there's simplified procedures. Number two is supposed to be 100% reserved for small business. So that's a good place to get your foot in the door. Sometimes they don't go small business. Why? Because if it's a license from Microsoft or, I don't know, any other IT service or cloud service, it's not going to go small business. But generally, everything is reserved 100% for small business. The other time that small business set-asides take precedence is the rule of two. So if there are two or more small businesses that can provide the product or service, then that requirement shall be set aside. Shall, not may, if, can, that's the law, right? And it actually just got codified with this last Congress just several weeks ago. So how does that happen? The contracting officer does market research. Remember when I said make sure your SAM profile is updated and your past performance is updated? Also, 1 minute. Also, when you see a request for quotation or a request for information, an RFI, RFQ, make sure you and your colleagues respond because that's their market research. They're trying to identify if there are two or more small businesses that can provide the product or service. And it's not at the best price. You don't have to be the cheapest. It's at a reasonable market price, right? So they have to follow the rule of two. It says shall. And who oversees that? So that's the SBA. My old office, we had PCRs, Procurement Center Representatives. They cover all buying activities. If you go to the SBA, do a PCR directory, it'll show you who the cop on the beat, the PCR is, that's covering that buying activity. They enforce the rule of two. So if you're seeing requirements that should have gotten set aside, and they're not, I'd go to the SBA website, figure out who covers that buying activity, and engage the procurement center representative. If they're not responsive, and when I do that, I'd also CC the small business specialist that covers that buying activity. They're not responsive. Every PCR has a boss. Their boss is the area director. That's also in the directory. I'd start engaging with them. So the underpinning of how the federal government gets to the 23% and the 5553 are these two things, the rule of two and the simplified acquisition threshold. If we're seeing, and because, so when I was running the program, and I know my time is up, when I was running the program, I was like distraught because we had 116 PCRs covering the tens of thousands of buying activities across the United States. They're down to 25, right? They cover everything. Now, the administration and the new SBA claims that they can do that through AI, but a lot of times buying activities will do what we used to call PCR shopping. So they'll figure out who's on vacation and then send the requirement there and be like, well, I didn't hear, and then just move forward. But if you see that requirements aren't getting set aside, like we, small businesses, actually end up being the cops because they just don't have the capacity and the capability. If you see requirements not getting set aside, engage with the PCR, engage with a small business specialist. They would actually appreciate your engagement in that sense. And then, by the way, you tell them, hey, I'm actually qualified for that, and I think it should have gotten set aside. So the next time that comes up for rebid, they know they're small businesses that can provide the product or service. I apologize if I went over time. This afternoon, mentor-protege, joint venture, teaming in the current environment, teaming up and becoming competitive to go after some of these government-wide acquisition vehicles and getting on the schedule, I think, at least from our perspective, is critical. You don't know what the flavor of the day is either. You don't know if it's going to be service-disabled, HubZone, women-owned, 8A. So finding partners that you trust and maybe doing joint ventures with them, that's a critical strategy as well, and we'll sort of talk about that. Thank you, guys. I appreciate your patience.
Thank you, John. Let's give him a round of applause. Okay, Riley, you're going to cut to our online audience, so they'll watch some videos, and we're going to take a short lunch break, and we will come back online.
We are super excited to be in Anchorage, Alaska at the SBDC, Small Business Development Center's Summit, focusing on AI and how AI technology can assist your business. We're here to support our export program, our tourism program, and all the work that we do at the National Center.
We're really hoping to showcase some of the opportunities using generative AI, particularly in rural and remote communities, to try and facilitate economic growth. Just showing people what's possible and then bringing different organizations together.
It's a really cool time to have a small business. We're utilizing AI, but we're just barely scratching the surface. It's exciting to listen to other people talk about the way that they've utilized the tools and think about the way that we could use tools like that in the future.
Right now, broadband and infrastructure is a huge topic. It's also going to create jobs and impact all these other sectors that are so important for the next generation.
Right now, AI is expanding so fast, and it's been such a huge game changer, accessing different alternative funding or grants. I've actually met some people who are just starting out. There's already resources here, so as part of our program, I can point out to the ones they have locally available and actually sit down with someone.
It's important to meet and listen to people just as a part of human connection. I'm here more to make contacts, identify early adopters who are doing the creative, innovative work in Indian country.
Our tourism program is in Anchorage, Alaska at the Alaska Native Heritage Center. Let's go inside and check it out. What do you think, Yvonne?
Let's go!
We're celebrating our 25th year anniversary. We have the only indigenously owned and operated gallery in the state of Alaska. The Hall of Cultures. We break it down with each different section here by the different cultural regions of Alaska. We try to represent all the different cultures and all the 229 federally recognized tribes and villages. We have 6 different interpretive village sites. In those village sites, we have amazing cultural items. A lot of people are familiar with our snow goggles, but people aren't familiar with our waterproof stitching, the importance of kayaks, different indigenous tools and things like that. So come say hi. You have some new friends over here at the Alaska Native Heritage Center.
Alaska tourism is such a foundational industry. It's so important to our economy. Small businesses and entrepreneurs, particularly indigenous entrepreneurs, are taking these outside dollars and using it to create businesses that leverage, what Alaska does best, which is the great outdoors, but also culture and history.
The drum, it's pretty important in the Yupik culture. It's kind of like the heartbeat of our dance. It's a very spiritually healing event, brings all of the dance members joy, and we feel like we are connecting with our ancestors every time we start dancing.
We're in Anchorage, Alaska at the sculpture competition for the state of Alaska. There's a lot of activity going on here in the town. We were just at ice bowling, and look at all the activity with these beautiful horses, and we're gonna go check out these sculptures.
Tourism is now expanding. It used to be 3 months out of the year, say May to August, and now it's turned into something that starts as early as April and doesn't end till the end of October.
Tourism is one of Alaska's great renewable resources. For people starting out a tourism business, find your niche, find what you're passionate about, what you love to share with other folks, and really focus on that and build that.
We just saw the Alaska State Snow Sculpture Championship, and now we're gonna go into the Ulu factory.
Tourism. We are noticing that huge shift for Alaska, especially for port towns.
I've been hired by a number of cruise lines to give talks about Native peoples in Southeast Alaska. I go into how we acquire and pass on our knowledge and how we live together. We influenced, shared, and cared for each other.
I was facilitating an Inuit blanket toss. The event itself was just a celebration after a successful whale hunt. It's a lot of fun getting folks who don't know anything about the culture of Alaska and to get tossed on the blanket. This blanket represents unity, cooperation, trust, commitment to a common process, and harmony in action. Everything needed to survive in the harsh climate of Alaska.
We're at the Fur Rondi, and we're getting ready for heat number 3. Stay tuned.
I'm Alaska Native Yupik, and I'm just so happy that we have a voice for rural Alaska and for Indigenous businesses and Indigenous people. It's just so great to be able to help support and promote those businesses and to encourage the next generation of entrepreneurs so that they can start businesses as well.
Really appreciate the work that the National Center does to help not just talking about capacity, but actually giving strategies and tools. When folks come to places like this, it's really about building those networks so that they don't have to feel like they're doing it alone. They can be part of professional groups.
I'm a minority-owned business. That's why we're here today, just to learn more about the Native side of everything.
NCAIED is trying to look at sustainability and long-term growth and building leaders for the future.
There is this expanded growth of business in Indian country.
What the sawmill does is it generates revenue for the tribe, provides jobs, as well as getting our people, the Washoe people, back onto the lands to do the conservation work and help with the land management around the area, putting that Washoe presence back on the land.
We are trying to get people jobs and keep people employed, have a better quality of life for our members, you know.
There were over 20,560 Native Americans who were removed from their lands, their families. For 90 years, the federal government assimilated our relatives into mainstream society. The campus, around 100 acres, it was returned to the Washoe Nation,
whose indigenous territories it was to start with. The primary purpose of the Cultural Center is a safe place for our elders. We want to be able to reclaim our culture.
What we are doing are taking advantage of opportunities. Federal grants, they're only going to last so long. We can use those as a start to get the training we need, get the people together. My goal is to be able to make those things sustainable and grow even larger.
It's great that the National Center is working with tribes and tribal governments and tribal individuals to really build economic development opportunities. I see a lot of success for tribes in the future.
Being on board with WDC and kind of working towards the future and letting them continue to grow and expand our businesses.
To be able to share our story and give a little bit of our history, especially regarding our economic development.
I can use our Cultural Center and Museum as a platform to show not just educators, but elected officials. Then my hope is that there can be future laws, legislation, better social programs. We want every Native thriving in Nevada.
Beyond boundaries to me means without limitations.
Doing the things that you are truly passionate about, moving past the social stigma. You're always going to expand into different things and not be held down to what everyone thinks of you.
We're not contained into these little places that maybe other systems have tried to put us in. We're part of a larger fabric, not only of the history of our own communities, but of the future of it too.
Director with the National Center. And it is my pleasure to introduce a relative from the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, Mr. Guthrie Ducheneau, CEO of Oahe Data. And he is going to be presenting the next topic of strengthening indigenous food systems. So let's give him a round of applause.
Does this one work too? Okay. There we go. That works for me. My topic is impact, from information to impact. Ag Systems is the guy after me, or the person after me. Okay. Thank you to those in attendance and the millions around the world on the online. My name is Guthrie Ducheneau. I'm the CEO for Oahe Data, which is a native-owned firm headquartered on the Cheyenne River Indian Reservation in South Dakota. I am born and raised there, a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, and a recovering entrepreneur and non-profiteer. I started a computer company in 1994 and was, for a short time, the only Native American reseller for both Gateway Computer and Dell Computer in the entire country, and was on my way to working toward getting designated as some of the small and disadvantaged business things back then. I wish there would have been, wish I would have known about places like the National Center, and I wish there would have been CDFIs out in our area back then, because I had the opportunity to do some really good work and make a huge impact in my life had I known about the types of support systems that were out there. I couldn't get banks to lend to me because I was located on a reservation. Their ignorance impacted my life. My lack of information impacted my life. Oahe Data was co-founded with me, with my partner, Jeff Lumpkin from Seattle. Jeff is a former executive at Microsoft, worked in the finance department there and the Power BI customer advocacy team. He designed one of the products that we'll be showing you later, Veritas Maps, which is a pretty slick Power BI visualization tool that lets us show a lot of the publicly available data that we have modified to fit our system visually on a lot of mapping type softwares, scatter plots, and other types of graphs. He was born and raised in the Seattle area, has lived all over the world, and has a degree in, from Cornell University and a master's from Virginia, University of Virginia. On to my topic. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the National Center and to the Sault Ste. Marie band up here for inviting and hosting us at this event. The reason I brought up sorry, I'm a little nervous. The reason I brought up my participation in entrepreneurship is that I thought this was going to be more of an, I've never been to one of these before, so I thought it was going to be more to do with tribal programs type things. Should have been clued by the part where it says enterprise development. And so the fact that it's small business is exciting for me. And I had to modify my presentation a little bit. For me, when we look at the data that we deal with, the difference between the most successful and the least successful communities and organizations in areas that we live, I don't believe it's access to resources, like some people would say. I think it's more fundamental than that. I think it's access to information about those resources. And I'm a living example of that. That's why I brought up the company that I had started and tried to keep going for 4 years. After we did finally get a CDFI in Cheyenne River, they used me as the example of what not to do. And I willingly would go there and tell everybody the trials and tribulations of trying to start a small business on the res, being ignorant of things like finance, such that I could not get the government contracts that were sent to me, spec'd out specifically for either Gateway or Dell, sent to my fax machine back in the day of fax machines. I couldn't get banks to lend me the money that I needed to buy the computers so I could resell them to the federal government. And so having access to that information would have made a huge difference in my life back then. I don't know if I would be here today selling the idea of data. I think I probably could have been a lot further along in a lot of other areas in my life if had that been the case. Robert earlier talked about if you want to try to get a loan from a bank, they're going to do a credit check on you. How many people offhand know what their credit score is? Okay, about half maybe. Had they not started offering it as a result of having debit cards and credit cards, I wouldn't know. That's not something I used to check a lot when I was younger, and now it's just kind of thrown at me every month. They say, hey, your credit score is updated. Most of the time going up these days for me because I'm doing better with that part of my life. But to the topic of information to impact. So like I mentioned, access to information I think is the most important thing to success. What you do with that information has a lot to do with that success, but just having access to it is an important thing. And the information that we have in our communities oftentimes is unrefined. And so when we want to work on some of the priorities, oh, I'm sorry, forgot where I was for a second. When we want to pick a priority in any of our communities, especially when we're talking about economic development, entrepreneurship, small and large businesses, these kind of are the ones that jump out for me. We need a place to live. We need to be able to have parents that work. We need to place a safe place for their children to go before school age so that they can go out and participate in the local economies. We need to be able to access the outside world. I live out in the middle of nowhere. Our reservation is roughly the size of Connecticut. We're very sparsely populated, but our tribe invested $30 million in broadband to the doorstep, fiber optic cable to the doorstep in 2012. So I'm out in the middle of nowhere. I'm 50 miles from the nearest town, and I'm able to participate in the digital economy because of the connectivity that I have because of a tribal broadband investment. And then I worked at a hospital in Eagle Butte, an Indian Health Service hospital back on Cheyenne River, and it was a relatively new building when I started working there. And what we found is when we increased the capacity and the size of the hospital, it increased the capacity and the size of the demand for healthcare at home. So 2 years prior to opening the new facility, we had 15,000 unique visits in 1 year. And those aren't unique individuals, it's that I could show up today with a broken leg and tomorrow with a head cold. Each of those would be counted as a visit. For a population the size that we have on our reservation, that's about 2 per visits per year, which actually isn't bad at all on average. When we increased the size of the hospital, built in that capacity, the number of visits doubled. We had over 30,000 unique visits just because we had more capacity to offer. And it was information and the impact of that information. The tribe had access to this information, was able to use that as justification for getting a bigger hospital and expanding the clinic. And let's see. A lot of the information that we use for business, like the stuff that the gentleman from the small business information was talking about earlier, a lot of that stuff is sequestered in federal databases. And those data sets are almost never aligned with data sets from other federal departments. They're incredibly disorganized and hard to read and hard to understand. And my brother recently worked for the was the administrator for the Farm Service Agency for the Biden administration. And when he would ask for a report to be done on all loan participants for their farm loan programs, He said it would take 6 weeks to get that done. They're using this antiquated system that's 35, 40 years old. The information that comes out of it is not standardized across even the USDA's departments, let alone other departments in the federal government. And so what we've done at Oahe Data is we understand that those numbers are out there, that they're in all of these different portals. Every one of them has a different shape, and a lot of them can't tell you where the information came from because they don't have the fields that are necessary to do that kind of thing. It's a spreadsheet out there or a CSV. Oftentimes what a lot of people think is data is a PDF, and when you want to try to make that data in that document actionable and usable, it's really difficult. You got to get it into a format where you can either turn it into a number or a measure. And you see the information sitting there in those federal portals. It doesn't do a heck of a lot to have that information in our communities if we don't know what to do with it. And for instance, if we want to, on the topic of childcare, if we want to find out not only which counties have the youngest populations, which would need the most childcare, but also the percent of income in those counties for childcare. Those types of information are out there, but they're in two different pots. If you don't have the ability of putting those two pieces of information together, then it's not useful for you when you're trying to identify what your priorities are moving forward as a organization or as a community. So what Oahe Data does is we are a data intelligence company. We're not trying to be a solution looking for problems. We don't presume to know the answer to the problems that you have in your communities, but we know where we can help you to find evidence to mitigate those problems in your communities. We have taken our data, structured it in such a way that it is easy for computers and databases and even artificial intelligence in some aspects to go through and to give you actionable information that is sourced back to the individual row of these publicly available data sets. And the way that I like to think about it is information in and of itself is generally unrefined or kind of raw. Once you turn it into data, which is organizing it and structuring it, then it becomes actionable. And when you turn it into and use it for proof, then it becomes evidence. So evidence is provable. Most communities have a lot of information. I like to tell people that there's just as much information in those lesser successful communities as there are in the most successful communities. Oftentimes the problem is it's just not refined. Imagine driving by a mining site and seeing one of those great big dump trucks that's got a whole back end full of ore back there that it's hauling to a refinery. They dump it into that refinery, it comes out of the other end looking something along the lines of this big. It's just a little AirPods case. All of the ore in that big dump truck is essentially useless and in its current state, and it's really not worth much until it's been refined. Once you get it down into something that is the size and shape of this, then you can use it as currency. Gold really didn't have an intrinsic value to it up until the electronic age. Once we found out it was a really good conductor of electricity and started using it in computers. Before, it was just this really pretty shiny metal that could bend and shape into things like currency and jewelry. So it had value based on what it looked like and how easy it was to use. It really found its value when we started using it in computers. And now it's the foundation for the digital age. It's the thing way down at base levels that goes along with that silicon that gets information from one place to another within our machines. Most communities, like I said, have a lot of data, but what they don't have is that data in an organized, usable format. And so what we do at Oahe Data is we try to prioritize organizing that data, making sure that it is in a consistent shape so that we can compare it to the other data sets. We verify where that data comes from, and we add a provenance or a provability and evidence portion of our data. Each of those individual measures is provable back to the row, like I mentioned before. And then we work on trying to interpret that data along with our clients such that they can use it to make the impact in their communities or in their own lives that they're trying to do. Impact starts after you organize, not before. This is just kind of another description of what we do with the data. You can see up on the top there, it's the CDC, census, NOAA data. We've got NOAA data back to the 1800s, late 1800s. So atmospheric and the weather data essentially back to then. We've got some USDA crop data back to the 20s. Our census data is about 15 years worth of longitudinal data for the community survey. American Community Survey, which is the annual census information that's out there. We've got over 1 billion observations that are refined, organized, and in our structure, in our databases, with about 12,000 individual measures, and everything can talk to everything else because of the way we've structured it. You see the bricks at the bottom of the refinery there. We take the data, put it into the format that we've created, and then at the end of that little ingot or that brick is almost like a Lego brick that we can just snap onto the rest of our data so that we can do our analysis, our queries and everything through all of those data sets in combination. The data doesn't care what your priorities are. The priorities are yours. The data is what we use to help address those priorities. And what the data is, essentially the types of data that we need in our priorities is we know where something is, so a place. We know that you looked at it and when you looked at it, so a time, and we know how much of it there was, so a measure. And then after that, we know whether it's like a word or a number. That's alphanumeric or numeric. Those are the two types of data that happen in spreadsheets. And those are the two types of things that you're going to be searching against and asking questions of when you're trying to address in words what your needs are and how you can best show a way of overcoming those needs if you can get people to work with you. If you're a company, that's getting them to buy your product. If you're a tribal organization, that's getting the types of funding and sources of revenue that we need to address the problems that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. A couple of examples of how we're trying to use this information right now. We're working with an organization in the Northwest that's a chamber of commerce that represents a lot of tribal regions, a lot of tribal nations up there in the Northwest. And we were looking for something specific to talk with them about because the chamber represents any kind of businesses. Well, one of the things for workforce development that they addressed was childcare. So we dove into the childcare numbers that were up there a little bit, and you can see here that the households with young kids are nearly 2 times more per capita in those tribes in the Northwest than they are against the national average. We have very young populations in our areas. The average income is significantly lower than other places. So you think even if I am a young couple and I do want to go to work and try to raise my average median income, based on just the numbers alone, there's a possibility that there's going to be more kids in my house than in other houses, just because that's what the numbers say. And Medicaid is the primary source of healthcare funding and payment in those communities. And nationwide, you can see that $172 billion a year is lost in this country because of inadequate child care services and resources. This is kind of one of the ways that we're trying to show the data that we have. It's hard to read on this, but like up here on the top, it shows the reservations or the tribes here on the left, total population. The next one is, I've got it blown up on my next slide here, percent of households with kids under 18. There's unemployment numbers in there, family poverty rates, that kind of stuff. And what we specialize in is trying to put the results of the data into a format that is understandable for whether you're the type of data nerd that likes to see numbers and numbers and tables, somebody that represents the stuff visually that would like to see where they are in the universe, not just what they are and what the number says, or in a different format, like, for instance, here's the numbers here. You can see that this is actually the Yakima Nation right there. That says 30,209 is the total population. The percent of households with kids under 18 is 48.9. And then when we go to the next slide, you can see that the total population is represented there. So the exact same information in two different formats, one for visual learners, one for numbers people. And then the last one is when we put it into the intelligence brief at the end, you can see again, same information, 48.9% percent with children under 18, total population, and then we can say what the data is, show you the numbers, and then tell you what the data means. Another organization that we're working with is an economic development organization for one of the tribes in the Southwest. And at a meeting that we had with the CEO of that company, he gave us a list of priorities to look at for him, the things that they're wanting to do for their tribal corporation. First and foremost is they're looking at building a new health center there. And so we dove into a lot of the demographic information. We looked at a lot of the population-based stuff. We looked at things like traffic. You can see that 41,000 vehicles a day go by where they're located. We went through as many of those types of things that we could, and then we presented to that organization all of the information that they needed so that they could better plan to do these things moving forward. This is what one of our data intelligence briefs looks like. The reason I put this in here is I wanted to kind of point out the provenance part of things. Up at the top, you can see the data source key. The bundles are what we're putting together with our database program. We're structuring these things into what we call a FP stand bundle. And so each of the things that are labeled with bundle there are things that come directly from the data that we put together. The primary data is citable government sources, so those types of sources that we haven't been able to download and reshape, but we still use on a day-to-day basis. There's certain types of information that the only way you can get it from the government source or the state-sponsored source is to basically do the queries locally on their website, and they don't let you just scrape all that information. You could type it all in if you wanted to, but they have these things that stop what they call robots from going and scraping the information and retrieving it. But they're still one of the more reputable sources out there. Even with their unorganized, non-relative, and unrelated sources, they're still one of the better ones out there. We've taken information directly from the partner and talked a lot about the press release that they did about the new health center, about some of their other funding priorities, things that they put right on their webpage. We were able to take that. And then the last is stuff that comes from news sources, kind of the least reliable because of the fact that news reporting can sometimes take on certain license and exaggerate and or underreport things. It does sound like somebody's knocking over there. This is the region where that particular client was looking to put the healthcare facility. And so you can see, whoops, up here on top are the different types of healthcare centers that are local to them. And then what they wanted, it was concentric 10-mile circles out to 80 miles was the service footprint of the new healthcare facility. And we were able to show what competing interests were out there. So the ones that are purple are tribal health, 638 contract ones. The orange ones are IHS clinics, and the red one there and there in Santa Fe, and then there's one in Albuquerque, are the Indian Health Service hospitals, so the full service hospitals. And since the person that we were working with happened to be in the telecommunications field prior to this, we included on the bottom there, you can't see it, but the percent in those communities that have adopted broadband, just as a way of showing some of the flexibility of the data that we have. And so we don't want, Oahe Data does not want people to be dependent on us. We want to be partners in the process of making the impact in your communities with the information that you have available to you. And so we don't want to be what my dad used to call the 10%ers. And every time there's a pot of money in Indian country, a bunch of people show up. They're kind of like the vultures that are circling over a carcass out in the middle of nowhere. And they're all looking for that 10%. They'll come in, they'll tell you, sell you the world, say all these things. Their job is to stay employed with you as a contractor as long as humanly possible until all the money's gone. That's not what we want to do. We want to make our community stronger by helping them to identify that information, organize it into data, turn it into evidence, so that it is something provable that we can throw up against either potential not employees, potential customers if you're a business, or those sources of sources of funding and revenue that we require and depend on in Indian country, like for instance, federal, state governments, philanthropic interests, those types of things. We need to make sure that the information available to us is something that we can defend our propositions to those organizations with. And so another one of the products that we're working on is this portal where we have all of our data bundles. You can see this one is the American Indian, gosh dang it to heck, American Indian Alaska Native bundle and the ACS. And you can type in a normal question in the thing. It doesn't have to be an official, like technical question. You can just basically say, hey, what's the income for single mothers in Yakima? And it'll just spit out an answer for you. And I can show you here. There's the next slide is, this one says what 5 counties in Oklahoma have the lowest median household income. And it does a SQL statement. SQL is a database language. So it's a little bit of computer programming type stuff. We have artificial intelligence helps us to write that statement, then hands it off to a program that we've developed. And that program will then throw that question up against the data and return the result back to a portal that's on the web. The way that we've structured everything with our data format and our data schema is such that the artificial intelligence can help with the question side of it, but it never sees the actual data. That's all handled with a program that can be basically on this laptop here. If I disconnect it from the web, we don't need access to the public internet for that kind of stuff, so we can make this stuff super secure. And especially for tribes, we can help them to maintain some data sovereignty through that process. One of the reasons why we have the mapping up there, Jeff is an expert in mapping. I've always been a fan of maps. If you were to look right behind my TV in my living room, there's a map of the world up there on the wall. I've just always been kind of enamored with them. And so what we can do is we can show you where your data resides and the measure of that data right on the physical maps. This is a map of South Dakota with various and sundry economic impact results, measures that have come from various federal, state, and local funding opportunities. This is Veritas Maps. It cut off my logo up on the top up there when I put it into the slideshow. There are 68 different domains in this data set. So AHRQ, which is the Association for Health, I always get this one wrong, healthcare, dang it. Anyway, there's CDC information in there. There's Department of Interior information. There's USDA information in here. I had planned to do a live demonstration of this, so I apologize for not being as fluent and fluid as I could be in this process. But what I wanted to show you with this map is that this is the population of Native Americans, Alaska Natives in the United States, and you can see that they're concentrated in places like Oklahoma and the Dakotas and the Southwest and the Northwest and Alaska, of course, for the Alaskan Natives. and not very populated out in here, but you can kind of see where each of the reservations are in those areas. The next slide shows you the percent of population under 17. So tying it back to that child care metric that was in that data set, the number of kids under 18, the data actually shows 17 in the data sets. But again, you can see that we're a super young population. There's where I live right there, the Southwest here, places like Appalachia even. What you see is there's a lot of American Indians, there's a lot of Latinos, and a lot of blacks that make up the younger part of the population in the nation. This next one was a little bit telling for me. I was clicking through the various health ailments here. So there's coronary heart disease, COPD, diabetes, asthma, depression, all those kinds of things. When you click on cancer, the reason it popped out for me is right here's where I live again, and there's not very much cancer in that area. And that sounds very encouraging until you realize it's because the age that people die there, they're not old enough to get cancer in a lot of instances. And it's amazing to be able to see that kind of data. It's just sad when you actually do. It's actually one of the things that brought Jeff and I together. We both kind of independently came to the conclusion that there are 4 main groups of people that show up in the data all the time in this country. It's people like from Indian country, people up in this area like inner city Detroit, some of the bigger cities, people down in the Rio Grande area there, El Paso, and then people in the Deep South. And what they are is Native Americans, Latino Americans, African Americans, and then in Appalachia, it's the poor white populations that are there. And when you scrape away who they are, and you look at what they are and where they are, the demographics say they're very similar. And we see that as an opportunity. If we can figure a way that we can help solve problems, for instance, in Appalachia that are addressing demographic issues, then that issue, if it's tied to demographics alone, we can take that out in a modular fashion and plug it into the Rio Grande Valley, plug it into Pine Ridge, South Dakota, and have a better chance at dealing with demographic issues if the cause of those issues is the same, which oftentimes it is, as well as the results of those types of demographic issues. A lot of what we do in Indian country, as much as I don't like it, is dependent on us receiving revenue from certain types of entities. So grant making stuff, philanthropic interests, that kind of thing. And what we do when we turn the data into dollars is we have to be able to defend it. That's where the evidence comes in. What you can show with the data